So we have Detective Springer today, which is going to be, pretty exciting. We were doing some B-roll on our last podcast, and we were in his office talking to another detective. It was funny because I was excited about the next episode, and I was talking to him. I'm like, hey, we got to do the next one. And he's like holding up this flyer, and he's like, I already have it. I identified one using Genealogy. And I'm like, get out of here. We got to talk about it. So today is going to be a little bit different. Usually we talk about these nameless cases, and, we're just asking for help and to identify them. But this one is actually kind of a success story.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we have identified one of these nameless cases.
Back from like 1964.
Yeah.
74.
So it's been like 50 years. So we're going to see not only what are the next steps, like what are we going to do now that we identified her,
but also how they did it.
Exactly, yeah. So,
and also to remind us that they don't give up.
Yeah, I mean, especially Springer. Springer's been here, for decades and decades, and, he's one of the most diligent detectives. He's, retired like 3 times, and he's come back because he doesn't give up.
Yeah, it's his passion.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty exciting. Can't wait. Let's bring him in. So welcome to The Lead. This is a podcast of law enforcement stories told to you by law enforcement officers. My name is Anthony.
And I'm Fatima Simic.
We have here today with us Detective Springer. Thank you for being here today. This is going to be a good story, and it's going to be interesting because we'll learn what are the next steps after you have identified some of these remains. So before we start, we did want to premise to everyone, like we do every episode, that the topics of this case are of graphic nature. We talk about remains. We're going to talk about some pretty gruesome details, so viewer discretion is advised. It's not for everyone. But if you do like, these crime stories and these real-life cases, we have a Facebook group called Palm Beach County Cold Cases, so follow us there, and we, divulge all the details, and you can share it so we can get some information from the public. So let's dig in. So what are we going to talk about today?
Today was a 1974 unidentified female that was found up on A1A in the Burnt Bridges area, which is north of Riviera Beach, up towards Jupiter on A1A. She was found in 1974. They were never able to identify her back then. The anthropologists they used back then listed her death as possibly a year and a half to 2 or 3 months from the time she was found.
A year and a half. So this was skeletal remains. There's nothing.
The skeletal remains, yeah. The only thing was there was some small pieces of clothing plus a skeleton, and there was also wire found at the scene.
And what kind of scene was it? Is it like a?
It's a mangrove area.
Okay.
On the west side of A1A, up close to the intercoastal.
Okay, so detectives back then, whose case was it? Was it originally PBSO's?
Yeah, it was Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office back then, unincorporated.
Okay, so they found the skeletal remains. What were the next steps?
Well, they found the skeletal remains. Of course, they take it to an anthropologist, and they look at it to determine, any injuries to the bones and maybe the possible cause of death. They never come up with a cause of death on Susan.
Okay.
She could have possibly been missing anywhere from the latter part of 72 up until the time she was found in 74.
Anything that came out from the anthropologist or the medical examiner's office about, you said they couldn't determine how she died?
No, they couldn't determine the exact cause of death. They figured her age was anywhere from 15 to 30 years of age.
Okay.
That's all it was determined at that moment?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what do you do from there?
FDLE put out a book with unsolved cases. They put it in there, gave it to the press, and Then back then, they came up with a possible suspect who lived in Michigan, who had made statements he killed some girl in Florida. But his time frame would have been 1974 when it had to happen. But they interviewed him, and they kind of felt that he did it back then.
But really, there's not much to go on. There's no...
Back in 1974, no. Yeah. You really didn't have that much to really go on. You had to rely on local bolos, newspapers, like I said, FDLE had a magazine that they put out with unsolved cases, and they put this case in my other cases back then.
So now let's fast forward, to our recent years. We've had Detective Autumn Kirk here a few times talking about her process of how she looks at these skeletal remains and starts designing some sort of art around them so that we can recreate what they used to look like, so that we can put it out to the media and to the public. Maybe somebody will recognize her. So around what time did that happen?
This is a little bit of a strange case anyway. We never really did anything because we had nothing to work with until 2017, around that time.
Okay.
And then we recovered the skull that had been missing, and that's when she did the composite. We did nuclear DNA, which was regular DNA, STRs, put it in CODIS, and we never got a match.
So how does it work? Like you can extract DNA?
They can extract the DNA from bones.
From bone,
yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then so you send that in, there's no match, there's no
match, there's nothing, yeah.
So what would it match to? Because when we think of CODIS, we think sometimes of criminals, right?
Yeah, back in 2009, 2008, somewhere in that time period, prior to my retirement, the National Institute of Justice had put out a grant with the University of North Texas to do DNA from missing persons' families and from skeletal remains or whatever, physical evidence we had. So back then, we had a list of all our long-term and our missing persons that were gone for a long time. So we went out and obtained DNA from, I think we had almost 100% of our missing persons.
And that's the DNA of the actual people that was missing, or the family
members of the missing persons. So we gathered all that, and then we got to the medical examiner's office, and we sent off everything we found that they had, the bones and everything. Then in 2010, just prior to my retirement, we had started to exhume bodies that had been buried. We got a grant from NIJ to pay for the exhumation of these bodies. I retired, and that was completed. We've got about everybody now.
Okay, so we have this database of DNAs from missing people or their families of missing people, and there was no match.
There was no match.
And so what do you do next? So let's fast forward.
There's not much we can do at that point except wait, like I said, every year they come out with something new. Let me think of the name of the company. Ortham.
So what do they do?
Well, Ortham, I got a call from a representative from Ortham, and they said they're having good success with skeletal remains and doing genealogy. And did we have any cases we'd be interested in doing? And
so genealogy is the science of like finding
family members.
Family members.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought of the 74 case, and the sheriff's office has been always very progressive, doing what needs to be done to get cases solved. The sheriff has always been, very supportive. So I went to my supervisor and I said, "Can we come up with money to try this?" And he said, "Yeah."
Because of this new technology, you guys are sending in a lot of these cases to genealogy and trying to find matches.
Yeah.
And we're pretty excited about the results because we're seeing some good results come in.
I mean, it's a new avenue. And the sheriff's office, we're going at it 100% as much as we can. And hopefully everything, we'll be able to do a lot more.
So you send it into Ortham.
Ortham.
And how long do they take?
I want to say I sent it in around December, somewhere in there. And by March, they call me up and they tell me this is probably the mother and these are probably the siblings. They give me all the names and everything. And I'm thinking, boy, this is great.
So they tell you there's a high probability that
yes,
we found the family members.
Yes.
That's got to be exciting for you.
I located the one brother.
Her brother or the...
Her brother.
Okay.
Yeah, her brother. I called him.
What does that conversation look like? How did you even?
Once they give me a name and a date of birth and everything, it's pretty. We have all the search engines, and then you just start searching, and there's a lot of different methods. And
So you ring them up and you're like,
I get a
I
phone
found your
number.
sister.
I get a phone number, and I just start calling. I try the latest phone number, and I just get down the line till I run out of numbers, and then go to another family member. But I hit pay dirt with the first one.
Who were you able to speak first? The brother?
The brother, yeah, because the mother is still alive, but she's in her 90s, and I didn't want to go to the mother because I didn't know what physical condition she was in. And at 90, you call somebody up, you go knock on the door, and it could be a traumatic experience.
Because it's huge news. So how did the brother react?
I called the brother up and I said, I have an identified missing person, and are you missing any relatives? And he said, yeah, I'm missing a sister.
Wow.
Susan. So that just started it. And then I went down and interviewed him in person. Then I interviewed the mother. Then I found the sister, interviewed her, and her other two brothers. And they both all said that right before Christmas in December of 1972, she just disappeared.
So, but at this point, you can't really say for sure that it's her. I mean, there's a high probability. What do you got to do to verify?
I got DNA from the mother,
Okay.
and I sent it to Ortham, and they compared Susan's DNA with the mother, and they said that's
Boom. It's a match.
It's a match.
So it's for sure her.
For sure, her.
Tell us about her. Who is she?
Well, Susan was a young girl, 15 years old. They were living at the Pan American Trailer Park in Fort Lauderdale,
Okay.
off of Andrews Boulevard. I mean, she wasn't in any trouble. She was never arrested. But she liked to run away once in a while. And she dropped out of school. And she would go to a friend's apartment down in Wilton Manors, which is right there. And she had some friends in the trailer park. But she just disappeared, and nobody knew where she went. Her clothes were still there, and she just disappeared back right before Christmas.
That must have been devastating for the family. I mean,
They reported her missing.
Yeah.
And back in the day, I mean, you go back to 1972. She'd been a runaway before, so they basically just treated her like a runaway. Whether they ever put her into NCIC, FCIC, I don't know. They couldn't find a report. Nobody could find a report where the family reported her missing. So, I mean, she just was never really in the system. So over the years...
Fell through the cracks.
Yeah. And if the families aren't vocal, detectives retire, patrolmen retire, people forget about it.
That's how cases get cold.
Cases get cold, and unless there's somebody there that's saying, hey...
Being an advocate.
Right. Then, sometimes cases just don't get the attention they really deserve.
Right.
And, she disappeared. And if people would have looked at everything back then, the detectives would have put two and two together. Because in, I want to say, January of 73, out of the same trailer park, there was another missing girl, Elsie Farmer, whose body turned up in Plantation.
Oh, wow.
With her friend, who was also missing, who lived right in the same area. But the Farmer girl lived down the street from where Susan lived.
That can't be a coincidence.
So now you got two girls missing out of the same trailer park within a short period of time. And their key suspect on the Farmer girl and her friend was Gerard Schaefer. He was a serial killer. He was from Fort Lauderdale. He was actually a police officer in Wilton Manors for a month or so.
Wow.
He got terminated. He went to Martin County and was a deputy. And in Martin County, he kidnapped two girls. Well, he actually kidnapped them. Took them out on Hutchinson Island, tied him up in the mangroves, left them because he got a call. Wow. They managed to get free. And at that point, he's calling up his boss in town. I messed up. I was trying to scare two girls, and I took them out on and did all this. And they were found, and of course, he got arrested for it. And he was out on bond during the time period that Susan went missing,
Oh,
and a period that this farmer girl went missing and her friend.
So there's a lot of similarities here. There's a lot of
A
connecting
lot of
dots.
similarities, yeah, especially when you look at two girls out of the same trailer park. And
The girls and the man girls that ran away, were they about the same age?
yes, they were all about the same age. He'd pick up runaways. That was his biggest target. When they arrested him for that, and then they realized he was suspects in two other girls, they charged him with their murders because they found them in the mangroves.
So he had killed previously 2 other girls?
But he got arrested for a double homicide of 2 girls that were taken out of Fort Lauderdale and found up there.
Wow.
Now, he had an apartment in Stewart, too. So back then, the detectives searched his apartment in Stewart and his mother's residence in Fort Lauderdale. They found identification to different people. They found jewelry that was identified as the farmer's girl's jewelry and everything else.
Did he ever confess to those?
No, he's never confessed. He's made, let's put it this way, he's insinuated at times, but he's never really come out and said, I did these. His girlfriend from when he was in high school got back with him, Sandra London, and she wrote a book, and she sent me over 500 pages of letters he wrote to her about how to write a book and different things. But he never admitted to anything in there so far that I've read, but there's nothing. But what he does is he says, I'm innocent, but if I don't win an appeal and get out of prison, he said, I'll confess to all this so we can write a good book. So you never know what he's doing. And then he had some other stories that they took when they did the search warrants that were really gruesome stories. So, but he's dead now, so I can't interview him.
How did he die?
He got stabbed to death in prison.
So how do we confirm if this suspect is it?
Well, you look at all the circumstances. You got 2 girls out of the same trailer park. This is his area where he seems to be concentrating, picking her out. He worked in Wilton Manors. Susan went to Wilton Manors. And she hitchhiked. She's a runaway.
She was tied.
She's up in the mangroves. She's apparently tied up because of the wire and everything. And he liked to hang him. That was one of his things. He liked to hang him. So everything's fitting together with the idea that she was taken there out of Fort Lauderdale because that's where she was last seen. She just disappeared. She was up there.
Now, we did a press conference, and you were asking the public for some friends that may have known Susan to come forward.
What I'm looking for now is the possibility of locating some of her friends that she had back then in the trailer park. And I'll give you a few names that if somebody out there knows them, please have them contact me. One of her friends was a Julie Hunt. Another friend was a Michelle Williamson. And another friend, Greg Anderson. I've been very successful with finding people because back then, a lot of the people lived at the Pan American Trailer Park. And the 2 ladies that run it now have records going all the way back to the 60s. So they were able to help me out with family names, father, mother, and sisters and brothers. So yeah, I found the Michelle that I was looking for. And she told me who was the best friend that could have told me everything probably was Julie Hunt. Julie died several years ago. But I did find her sister who told me, that Julie said she just disappeared. That was her best friend. She don't know what happened to her, but she kept saying she's dead. I know she's dead. But she never elaborated on why she believed she was dead. I'm 99% sure it's Schaefer. I'll keep looking, but at this point, there's nothing that points to anybody else.
On behalf of all of Palm Beach County, we thank you for diligently working this case nonstop, not giving up. You brought some sort of closure to the family. This is, one of the most interesting cases we've talked about in this podcast. And I kind of see a pattern here. I think a lot of these cold cases, of these nameless cases, are going to be, we're going to start identifying them based on this technology of genealogy.
That's the new thing for the future right now is genealogy. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell the people out there, if you have a missing person that's been gone for years and they were reported missing back in the 80s and 70s and you know that they're missing and they're still missing, contact your local police and see if there is a report out there, if somebody made a report. And if there is a report and they're not in the system because they drop out of the system, if you don't update it every year that they're missing, then they drop out. So you have to follow up and make sure that they're still in the system. Susan's never in the system.
So the takeaway is if you have a family member that you know that's been missing, contact your local law enforcement office. Even if you think that they ran away, like in this case.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and if you didn't do anything criminal, then put your genealogy out there someplace.
Right.
Maybe you'll get a match sometime. Yeah.
Great points. Thanks again, Detective, for being here. I appreciate your time. And we'd love to have you back. Let us know if you find anything in those letters.